The city was quiet that night. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that creeps into your bones, makes you feel like you're the only soul awake in a world that's gone to sleep. Ethan sat in his penthouse study, the glow of a single lamp casting shadows on the walls. His whiskey sat untouched on the desk, the ice melting into a puddle. His tie hung loose around his neck, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He was tired. Not just from the day board meetings, client calls, Mia's bedtime tantrum, but from something deeper. Something he couldn't name. A knock shattered the silence. Sharp. Urgent. It came from the front door, echoing through the marble-floored foyer. Ethan froze, his hand hovering over the glass. Who the hell knocks at 10 hours 17 p.m.? No one came unannounced. Not to a man like him. Not to a man who'd built his life on control, on schedules, on keeping the world at arm's length. He stood, smoothing his shirt, and crossed the room in long strides. Mia was asleep upstairs, her soft snores a faint hum through the baby monitor on his desk. He didn't bother checking the security camera. Maybe he should have. Maybe then he'd have braced himself. But he didn't. He opened the door, and there she was. Lily. She stood in the hallway, clutching his navy cashmere jacket against her chest. Her knuckles were white, her grip so tight it looked like she was holding on to more than just fabric. Her legs were bare, long and pale, catching the dim light. Her dark hair was damp, clinging to her neck, like she just stepped out of the rain or a shower. Her eyes, wide and unreadable, locked onto his. She didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there, her breath shallow, her presence a question he wasn't ready to answer. Ethan's throat tightened. His hand gripped the doorframe, anchoring him. "Did you forget your clothes?" His voice came out rough, half a joke, half a desperate attempt to make sense of her. She tilted her head, her lips curling into a faint, defiant smile. "I came to return this. You left it at the gala." The gala. 2 weeks ago. A charity event at the art museum, all crystal chandeliers and fake smiles. Ethan had gone because he had Toa's name was on the donor list, his face expected in the photos. Lily had been there, not as a guest, but as a server. He'd noticed her right away, not just because she was beautiful, though she wore sharp cheekbones, eyes that seemed to see through you, but because she moved like she didn't belong. Quick hands, guarded glances, slipping through the crowd of millionaires like a ghost. She'd been shivering that night, her thin black dress no match for the chilly balcony where she'd taken a break. Ethan had seen her from across the room, standing alone, arms wrapped around herself. He'd walked over, no plan, just an impulse, and draped his jacket over her shoulders. She'd flinched at first, then looked at him. Really looked, like no one had in years. They'd talked. About nothing, really, the weather, the art, the way rich people clap too loud at speeches. But it felt like something. She'd worn his jacket the rest of the night, her fingers tracing the seams, her eyes softer than they'd been before. He hadn't seen her since. But he'd thought about her. Too much. Right. Ethan's voice was flat, guarded. He didn't move from the doorway. "Thanks." She didn't hand him the jacket, didn't step back. Instead, she took a step closer, her bare feet silent on the hardwood. "Aren't you going to invite me in?" Her words hung in the air, heavy, like a dare. Ethan's pulse kicked up, a warning he ignored. He should have said no. Should have taken the jacket, closed the door, gone back to his whiskey and his silence. He was 38, a father, a man with a daughter to protect, a reputation to uphold. Lily was, 25? 26? A girl from a world he didn't know, with eyes that held secrets he wasn't sure he wanted to unravel. But he didn't say no. He stepped back, just enough, and she brushed past him. The scent of rain, and something floral cheap shampoo, maybe hit him like a punch. His heart thudded, too loud, too fast. He closed the door behind her, the click sounding final. She moved into his living room like she belonged there, perching on the edge of his leather couch. The jacket was still clutched to her chest, her legs crossed, deliberate, the hem riding up just enough to make his mouth go dry. He stayed standing, arms crossed, trying to anchor himself against the pull of her. "Why are you here, Lily?" His voice was low, careful, like he was afraid of the answer. She shrugged, but her eyes didn't leave his. "You were kind to me that night." "No one's kind to me." He laughed, a dry, defensive sound. I gave you a jacket. That's not kindness. That's common decency. Is it? She leaned forward, just enough for the jacket to shift, revealing the curve of her collarbone, the soft hollow at her throat. You looked at me like you saw me, not the server, not the poor girl. Me. His jaw clenched. He remembered that night too well. The way her eyes had softened when he asked her name. The way she'd lingered when he said goodnight, her fingers brushing his as she handed back his wine glass. He'd gone home and lain awake, hating himself for wanting her, for noticing the way her dress clung to her hips, for wondering what her life was like when the gala lights went out. You don't know what you're starting, he said, turning to the bar cart in the corner. He poured water he didn't want, just to put space between them, to give his hands something to do. She followed him, silent, stopping in the doorway to the kitchen. I saw the way you looked at me, she said, her voice softer now, less certain. I haven't stopped thinking about it. He set the glass down too hard, the clink echoing in the quiet. You're playing a dangerous game. Am I? She reached for the jacket's zipper, pulling it down halfway. The fabric parted, revealing nothing but skin smooth, pale, flushed, no shirt, no bra, nothing. Ethan's brain stalled. He stared, unable to stop himself, tracing the curve of her breast, the shadow where the jacket gaped. His hands clenched at his sides, nails biting into his palms. Why are you doing this? His voice was a growl, barely his own. She met his eyes, unflinching. Because you're the only person who's made me feel alive in years. End quote. He turned away, dragging a hand through his hair. He didn't want to hear that, didn't want to believe it. I'm not your savior, Lily. I'm not what you think I am. I don't want a savior, she said, stepping closer. Her voice was steady, but there was a tremor beneath it, a crack in her armor. I want you. He should have stopped her, should have sent her home, called her a cab, done anything but stand there, feeling the heat of her body inches from his. Her fingers brushed his wrist, light as a whisper, and he flinched like her touch burned. This is wrong, he muttered, more to himself than to her. Then stop me, she said, her eyes daring him, her voice steady now, like she'd made up her mind. But he didn't. She stepped closer, and the jacket slipped from her shoulders, pooling on the floor with a soft thud that felt like a gunshot in the silence. She stood there, unashamed, her body lit by the faint glow of the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She was beautiful not in a polished, perfect way, but in a raw, aching way that made his chest tighten. I can leave, she said, her voice cracking just a little. But I don't want to. He moved before he could think, closing the distance, his hands hovering over her shoulders, not touching, not yet. This will ruin everything, he whispered, his voice raw, like the words had been ripped out of him. She tilted her head, her lips inches from his. Everything's already ruined. She kissed him, and he let her. It was hungry, desperate, the kind of kiss that burned away reason. Her hands slid under his shirt, her nails grazing his skin, sending sparks through him. He touched her like she might vanish her waist, her hips, the small of her back. She was warm, real, and he was drowning. They didn't speak again until hours later, tangled in his sheets, the city lights painting stripes across her skin. She stared at the ceiling, her breath uneven, her hand resting on his chest. He could feel her heartbeat, fast and unsteady, matching his own. What are we doing? He asked, his voice barely audible, like he was afraid of the answer. She didn't answer, just turned her head away, her hair spilling across the pillow. That silence cut deeper than he expected. Morning came too fast. Ethan woke to an empty bed, the sheets cold where she'd been. He sat up, his head pounding. Not from whiskey, but from the weight of what he'd done. The jacket was folded on the kitchen island, neat, deliberate. No note. No trace of her except the faint scent of her on his pillow, something floral and fleeting. He went through the motions, dropped Mia at preschool, her tiny hand in his, her chatter about dinosaurs, a lifeline he clung to. Saturday through meetings, nodded at the right times, signed papers he barely read, but his mind was elsewhere, replaying every moment. Her eyes, her touch, the way she'd looked at him, like he was more than a name on a building, more than a man who'd forgotten how to feel. Guilt gnawed at him. He was 38, a father, a man who didn't do reckless. Lily was young, broken, someone he should have protected, not wanted. He didn't even know her last name, didn't know where she lived, what she did when she wasn't serving champagne to people who didn't see her. And yet, he'd let her in, let her unravel him. He tried to push it down, told himself it was a mistake, a moment, something he could forget. But 2 days later, at a coffee shop near his office, he saw her. She was at the counter, counting out change from a worn wallet, her hair pulled back, her jeans frayed at the knees. She didn't see him, didn't look up, just took her coffee and left, her shoulders hunched, like she was carrying something heavy. He didn't follow her, but he wanted to. The next week was a blur. Mia got a cold, and Ethan spent nights on her bedroom floor, a pillow under his head, listening to her cough. Work piled up, contracts, investor calls, a new project that could make or break his company. He welcomed the chaos. It kept him from thinking about her. But at night, when the penthouse was quiet, she was there. In the way his hands remembered her skin, in the way his bed felt too big, too empty. Then, at a friend's dinner party, she was there. A guest of a guest, sitting across the table, her hair loose, her dress modest, but clinging to her in a way that made his pulse spike. She didn't look at him, not once. Laughed with the others, her voice light, like nothing had happened, like she hadn't been in his bed, her breath on his neck, her hands pulling him closer. It stung, more than it should have. He cornered her later, by the coat rack, his voice low, controlled. You planned this. She didn't flinch. Just met his eyes, her expression unreadable. Number, I almost didn't come, but I wanted to see if you could look at me. I'm looking, he said, his voice tight, his hands itching to reach for her. Can you? She held his gaze, and for a moment, he saw it fear, not of him, but of herself. You think this is easy for me? She whispered, her voice barely steady. You think I don't hate myself for wanting you? Her words hit like a slap. He stepped closer, too close, the air between them electric. Then why did you come to my door? Her breath hitched. Because for one night, I wanted to be someone else, someone who could have you. The words broke something in him. They were two people pretending they could outrun the consequences, pretending they were strong enough to walk away. But they weren't. He wanted to kiss her again, right there, in the dim light of the hallway, with the hum of the party behind them. But he didn't. He let her walk away, her heels clicking on the hardwood, her scent lingering like a ghost. Days turned into weeks. Ethan threw himself into work, into Mia, into anything that could fill the space she'd left. But she was everywhere, in the way the city lights reflected on his windows, reminding him of her skin. In the way Mia asked why he was so quiet, her big eyes searching his face. He started to wonder if he'd imagined her, if that night had been a dream. Then, at 1 a.m. on a Thursday, his phone lit up. Her name on the screen, no text, no warning, just a call. He answered without thinking, his heart in his throat. Lily. She was crying. Not loud, not dramatic, just a small, strangled sound, like she was trying to hold it in but couldn't her. I'm outside, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't go anywhere else. He threw on a hoodie, his hands shaking, and rushed to the door. She was on the steps, curled up in his jacket, her face streaked with tears. Her knees were pulled to her chest, her hair a mess, like she'd been running. He dropped to his knees in front of her, his heart racing. What happened? She looked at him, her eyes red, raw, like she'd been underwater for weeks. I told my roommate, she said, her voice small, broken. She said I'm a fool, that you'll never want me. Not really. The words hit him like a punch. He sat beside her, their shoulders brushing, the cold stone steps biting through his jeans. What do you want, Lily? She turned to him, her eyes searching his, unguarded for the first time. I want to stop pretending I don't feel this. He didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to tell her he felt it too, that it scared him, that it was bigger than both of them. So he just sat there, his hand inches from hers, the city humming around them. I'm not proud of what we did, he said finally, his voice low. But I don't regret it. Not you. She leaned into him, her head on his shoulder, her breath warm against his neck. What happens now? I don't know, he admitted, his voice raw. But I'm tired of hiding. Oh. They sat like that, silent, until the sky started to lighten, the first streaks of dawn painting the city gray. For the first time, Ethan felt like they weren't running. Not yet. But he knew the world wouldn't wait. Not for them, not for two people who'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross. The dawn broke slow and gray, the city waking up around them. Ethan and Lily sat on the steps of his building, the cold stone biting through his jeans, her head still resting on his shoulder. Her breathing had steadied, the tears dried on her cheeks, but she hadn't moved, hadn't pulled away. Neither had he. The weight of her against him felt like the only real thing in a world that was starting to blur at the edges. He didn't know how long they'd been there. An hour? 2? Time had a way of slipping when she was close, like the rules of the world didn't apply. But the first rays of sunlight glinted off the glass towers across the street, and reality crept in. Mia would be up soon, her little feet padding down the hall, calling for him. His phone buzzed in his pocket, probably a work email, a reminder of the life he couldn't escape. And Lily? What was she going back to? A roommate who judged her? A life he didn't know? "We can't stay here," he said, his voice low, rough from the night. She lifted her head, her eyes meeting his. They were red, tired, but there was something new in them. Not fear, not regret, but a quiet resolve. "I know." He wanted to ask her everything. Where she lived, what made her cry, why she'd chosen his door, his jacket, him. But the questions stuck in his throat, heavy, like they'd break whatever this was if he let them out. Instead, he stood, offering her his hand. She took it, her fingers cold but steady, and he pulled her up. The jacket slipped off her shoulders, and she caught it, clutching it to her chest like a shield. "Come inside," he said. "Just for a minute. You need coffee, or water, something." She hesitated, glancing at the street, then back at him. "I shouldn't." You're here," he said, his voice softer now. "You're already here." She followed him inside, her steps silent on the marble floor. The penthouse felt different with her, in it too big, too sterile, like it was showing off for someone who didn't care. He led her to the kitchen, flicking on the light. She perched on a stool at the island, the jacket in her lap, her bare legs dangling. He busied himself with the coffee maker, anything to keep his hands from reaching for her. "You don't have to do this," she said, her voice quiet. "Play host. I'm not someone you need to take care of." He turned, leaning against the counter, his arms crossed. "Then why are you here, Lily?" Her lips parted, but no words came. She looked down at the jacket, her fingers tracing the zipper. "I don't know," she admitted. I couldn't go home. Not after telling her." "Your roommate?" She nodded, her eyes distant. "Jess. She's my best friend. Or was. I told her about you. Not everything, just enough. She said I'm an idiot, that I'm chasing something that'll destroy me." Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to argue, to tell her she wasn't an idiot, that whatever this was, it wasn't just her. But he didn't, because part of him agreed with Jess. This whatever it was dangerous, reckless. He was a father, a man with a life built on stability. She was, what? A stranger who'd walked into his world and turned it upside down. "What did you tell her?" he asked, his voice careful. She looked up, her eyes searching his. "That I met someone. That he made me feel something I haven't felt in years. That I couldn't stop thinking about him." His pulse kicked up, a mix of want and guilt. "And what did she say?" "She said men like you don't fall for girls like me." Her voice was steady, but there was a crack in it, a wound she was trying to hide. "She said you'll use me, then leave me. That I'm just a story you'll tell when you're bored." Ethan flinched. The words hit too close, not because they were true, but because they could be. He'd seen men like that as colleagues, his clients, men who took what they wanted and walked away. He wasn't one of them. Or was he? He'd let her in that night, let her kiss him, let himself want her, knowing it was wrong. "That's not who I am," he said, but the words felt hollow, like he was trying to convince himself as much as her. "Then who are you?" she asked, her voice sharp now, challenging. "Because I don't know, Ethan. I don't know anything about you. Just that you're rich, you're a dad, and you looked at me like I was more than nothing." He opened his mouth, then closed it. What could he say? That he was a man who'd lost his wife 3 years ago, who'd buried himself in work to keep the pain at bay? That he was a father who loved his daughter, but felt like he was failing her every day? That he was lonely, so lonely it hurt, and she'd walked in and made him feel alive for the first time in years? "I'm not good at this," he said finally, his voice low. I don't, I don't do this." "Do what?" "This." He gestured between them, frustrated. "You, me, whatever this is." She laughed, a small, bitter sound. "You think I do? You think I go around showing up at men's doors, half naked, hoping they'll want me? Then why me?" The question came out sharper than he meant, but he needed to know, needed to understand why she'd chosen him, why she was here, why she was breaking every rule he'd set for himself. She looked away, her fingers tightening on the jacket. "Because you saw me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "At the gala. You didn't just look at me. You saw me, and I haven't been seen in a long time." The words hit him like a punch. He remembered that night, the way her eyes had softened when he asked her name, the way she'd lingered when he said goodnight. He'd seen her, yes, but he hadn't known what it meant to her, hadn't known it could mean so much. He crossed the kitchen, stopping just short of her, his hands itching to touch her. "Lily," he said, his voice low, "this is a bad idea. You know that, right?" She looked up, her eyes meeting his, unflinching. "I know, but I'm here anyway." The coffee maker beeped, breaking the moment. He turned away, pouring 2 mugs, his hands shaking just enough to betray him. He slid one across the island to her, keeping the counter between them like a barrier. She wrapped her hands around the mug, her fingers pale against the black ceramic. "Tell me something," she said, her voice soft now, almost shy. "Something real. Not the stuff everyone knows. Not the rich guy, single dad stuff. Something you." He leaned against the counter, the mug warm in his hands. "Like what?" "Anything. What's the last thing that made you laugh? Really laugh?" He thought for a moment, surprised by the question. "Mia," he said finally. "Yesterday. She was trying to teach me how to braid her doll's hair. I was terrible at it. Kept getting the strands all tangled. She laughed so hard she fell off the couch." Lily smiled, a real smile, not the defiant one she'd worn at the door. "That's cute. She sounds like a handful." "She is," he said, his voice softening. "She's everything." Her smile faded just a little. "You're a good dad." He shook his head, looking down at the coffee. "I try, but I'm not sure I'm good at it. I'm gone too much. Work, meetings, travel. I miss things. Her school plays, her soccer games. I'm trying to be enough, but—" He trailed off, surprised he'd said that much. She watched him, her eyes steady, like she was seeing him now, the way he'd seen her. "You're enough," she said, her voice quiet but sure. "She's lucky to have you." He didn't know what to say to that, didn't know how to tell her that her words hit something deep, something he hadn't let himself feel in years. So he just nodded, taking a sip of coffee he didn't taste. They sat in silence for a while, the city waking up outside. The hum of traffic, the distant wail of a siren. Normal sounds, but they felt wrong, like they didn't belong in this moment. He wanted to keep her here, to ask her to stay, but he knew she couldn't. Not yet. Not like this. "I should go," she said finally, setting the mug down. "Before your daughter wakes up." He nodded, his chest tight. "Let me call you a cab." "I can walk," she said, standing, the jacket clutched to her chest again. "It's not safe," he said, his voice firm. "Not at this hour." She looked at him, her lips twitching, like she wanted to argue but didn't have the energy. "Fine." He pulled out his phone, booking a car through an app. "It'll be here in 5 minutes." She nodded, moving toward the door. He followed, his steps heavy, like he was walking through water. At the door, she turned, her eyes meeting his. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft, "for letting me in." He wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. So he just nodded, opening the door for her. She stepped into the hallway, then turned back, her eyes searching his. "Ethan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "don't hate me for this." "I don't," he said too fast, too honest. "I don't hate you." She nodded, like that was enough, and walked away. He watched her go, the jacket still in her arms, her silhouette disappearing into the elevator. The doors closed, and she was gone. The next few days were a blur. Ethan threw himself into work, into Mia, into anything that could drown out the memory of her. But she was everywhere. In the coffee mug she'd used, still sitting in the sink. In the way his bed felt too big, too empty. In the way Mia asked why he was so quiet, her big eyes searching his face. He tried to focus. Took Mia to the park, pushed her on the swings, laughed when she demanded he go down the slide with her. Saturday through board meetings, signed contracts, smiled for clients. But his mind was elsewhere, replaying her words. You saw me. Replaying her touch, her breath, the way she'd looked at him like he was more than his name. His money, his life. He didn't hear from her. No calls, no texts, nothing. He didn't even know her number, he realized, or where she lived. She was a ghost, slipping in and out of his life, leaving only questions in her wake. He started to wonder if he'd imagined her, if that night had been a dream. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, he saw her. He was leaving his office, a glass tower in the heart of the city, when he spotted her across the street. She was sitting on a bench, a book in her lap, her hair pulled back, her jeans frayed at the knees. She didn't see him, just sat there, her head bent, her fingers tracing the pages like they held some secret. He should have kept walking, should have gotten in his car, driven home, forgotten her, but he didn't. He crossed the street, his heart pounding, his hands shoved in his pockets to keep them from shaking. Lily, he said, stopping a few feet away. She looked up, startled, her eyes wide. For a moment, she didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at him like she wasn't sure he was real. Then she closed the book, her hands trembling just enough to betray her. Ethan, what are you doing here? He asked, his voice softer than he meant. She shrugged, her lips twitching into a faint smile. Reading. It's a free country. He laughed, a small, surprised sound. Fair enough. She looked at him, her eyes searching his, like she was trying to read him the way she'd read her book. Why are you here? I work there, he said, nodding at the tower behind him. Just finished a meeting. She nodded, like that made sense, but her eyes didn't leave his. You look tired. He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly self-conscious. Long week. Yeah, she said, her voice soft. Me too. They stood there, the city moving around them, cars honking, people rushing past, the hum of life. But it felt like they were alone, like the world had shrunk to just the two of them. How's Mia? She asked, breaking the silence. He smiled, surprised she remembered. She's good. Got a cold last week, but she's back to ruling the house. Lily's lips curved, a real smile this time. Sounds like her. He wanted to ask her something, anything, to keep her talking, to keep her here. But before he could, she stood, tucking the book under her arm. I should go, she said, her voice quiet. I've got work. Where do you work? The question slipped out before he could stop it. She hesitated, like she wasn't sure she wanted to answer. A diner, downtown. Nothing fancy. He nodded, filing that away. Not sure why it mattered. Okay. She looked at him, her eyes soft, almost sad. Take care, Ethan. You too, he said, his voice rough. She turned and walked away, her steps quick, like she was afraid to look back. He watched her go, his chest tight, his hands still in his pockets. He didn't follow her, but he wanted to. The diner stayed in his mind. He didn't know why. Maybe because it was a piece of her, something real, something he could hold on to. He didn't go looking for it, not at first. He told himself he wouldn't. Told himself he'd let her go, let this go, whatever it was. But on Friday night, after Mia was asleep, after the penthouse was too quiet, he found himself Googling diners downtown. There were dozens. He didn't know which one was hers, didn't even know her last name to narrow it down. But the idea of her out there, working late, pouring coffee for strangers, made his chest ache. He closed his laptop, poured a whiskey, and tried to forget her. He couldn't. The next day, he took Mia to a museum, one of her favorite places. She ran through the exhibits, her laughter echoing off the walls, her ponytail bouncing. He followed, smiling, nodding, but his mind was elsewhere. On her. On the way, she'd looked at him on that bench, like she wanted to say something but couldn't. Daddy. Look, Mia called, pointing at a dinosaur skeleton. It's a T-Rex. He knelt beside her, forcing himself to focus. Pretty cool, huh? The coolest, she said, her eyes wide. Can we get a T-Rex for the house? He laughed, ruffling her hair. Maybe a small one. She giggled, running off to the next exhibit. He stood, his smile fading, the weight of the week settling back in. He loved Mia, loved these moments, but they weren't enough to fill the hole inside him. Not anymore. That night, after Mia was in bed, he drove downtown. He didn't plan it, didn't let himself think about it, just got in his car and drove. The city lights blurring past. He didn't know which diner was hers, but he picked one at random. A neon-lit place called Rosie's, its sign flickering in the dark. He parked across the street, his hands tight on the wheel. This was stupid, reckless. He was a grown man, a father, sneaking around like a teenager, but he couldn't go home. Not yet. He went inside, the bell above the door jingling. The place was half empty, the air thick with the smell of grease and coffee. He slid into a booth, his back to the wall, his eyes scanning the room. No sign of her. A waitress came over, older, her name tag reading, Doris. What can I get you? She asked, her voice tired but kind. Coffee, he said, his voice rough. Black. She nodded, shuffling off. He leaned back, his heart pounding, his eyes on the door. He didn't know what he was doing here. Didn't know what he'd say if she walked in. But he stayed, sipping coffee that tasted like tar, watching the clock tick past midnight. She didn't show. He left a 20 on the table and drove home, the city quiet around him. He felt like an idiot. A fool, like her roommate had said. But he couldn't shake her. Couldn't shake the way she'd looked at him. The way she'd felt. The way she'd made him feel alive. Weeks passed. Ethan settled back into his routine work. Mia, sleep, repeat. He didn't see her, didn't hear from her, but she was there, a shadow in his mind. He started noticing things he hadn't before. The way his colleagues talked about women like they were disposable. The way his friends' marriages were held together by convenience, not love. The way he'd built a life that looked perfect but felt empty. He started to change, in small ways. He left work early to take Mia to the park. Said no to client dinners. That didn't matter. Started cooking again. Real meals, not just takeout. Mia noticed, her eyes lighting up when he made her favorite pancakes, her laughter filling the penthouse. But at night, when the world was quiet, he thought of Lily. Wondered where she was, what she was doing, if she was thinking of him. He didn't Google diners again, didn't drive downtown, but he kept her coffee mug in the sink, unwashed, like a reminder she'd been real. Then, at a charity auction, she was there. Not as a server this time, but a guest, standing by the bar, her dress simple but elegant, her hair loose. She was talking to a man, older, his hand on her arm. Ethan's stomach twisted, a mix of jealousy and guilt. He had no right to feel this way. She wasn't his. She'd never been his. But when her eyes met his across the room, everything stopped. She froze, her smile fading, her hand dropping from the man's arm. He felt it, the pull, the same one he'd felt that night on his steps. She excused herself, moving through the crowd, her eyes never leaving his. Ethan, she said, stopping a few feet away. Her voice was steady, but her hands were clenched, betraying her. Lily, he said, his voice rough. You look good. She smiled, a small, sad smile. So do you. They stood there, the noise of the auction fading, the world shrinking to just them. He wanted to ask her everything, why she was here, who the man was, what she'd been doing since that night. But before he could, the man from the bar appeared, his hand on her shoulder. Lily, they're starting the bidding, he said, his voice smooth, proprietary. She nodded, her eyes still on Ethan. I'll be there in a minute. The man glanced at Ethan, sizing him up, then walked away. Ethan's jaw tightened, his hands in his pockets to keep them from shaking. Friend of yours? He asked, his voice low. She looked away, her lips pressing into a thin line. He's someone who thinks he knows me. And does he? She met his eyes, her gaze steady. Number. Not the way you do. The words hit him hard, stirring something he'd tried to bury. He stepped closer, his voice low, urgent. Lily, what are we doing? Whatever this is, it's not going away. She swallowed, her eyes shining. I know. Then what do we do? She didn't answer, just looked at him, her eyes full of everything she couldn't say. Then she turned and walked back to the bar, her steps slow, like she was fighting herself with everyone. He didn't follow her, but he wanted to. The auction hall buzzed with chatter, the clink of champagne glasses, the smooth cadence of the auctioneer's voice calling out bids. Ethan stood frozen, his eyes locked on Lily's retreating figure. Her dress swayed with each step, simple but clinging to her in a way that made his chest tighten. She didn't look back, not once, but he felt her, the weight of her words. Not the way you do, like a hook in his ribs, pulling him toward her even as she walked away. He should have left. Should have grabbed his coat, gone home to Mia, buried himself in the routine that kept him grounded. But his feet wouldn't move. His hands stayed in his pockets, clenched into fists, as he watched her rejoin the man at the bar. The man older, slick, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, leaned in, saying something that made her nod, her expression unreadable. Ethan's jaw tightened. He had no right to care, no claim on her. But the sight of that man's hand on her arm, casual, proprietary, made something dark twist in his gut. He turned away, forcing himself to focus on the auction. A painting was up, some abstract thing with bold colors and no meaning. The bids climbed 50,000, 60, 70. He didn't care. He bid anyway, raising his paddle. Not because he wanted the art, but because he needed something to do, something to keep his hands busy, his mind off her. The auctioneer called his name, and heads turned. He nodded, his face a mask. As the gavel fell, 80,000, sold. The room applauded, a polite ripple of sound, but it felt distant, like it was happening underwater. He glanced at the bar. Lily was gone. The man, too. His stomach dropped, a mix of relief and dread. Where was she? Had she left with him? The thought made his throat burn, but he pushed it down. She wasn't his. She'd never been his. He moved through the crowd, shaking hands, smiling at people whose names he barely remembered. They talked about the painting, the charity, the weather. He nodded, said the right things, but his eyes kept scanning the room. For her. Always for her. And then he saw her. She was by the balcony doors. Alone, her arms crossed, her eyes on the city skyline. The lights outside painted her in soft gold, her hair loose, catching the glow. She looked smaller somehow, like the weight of the night was pressing her down. He didn't think, just moved, cutting through the crowd, his heart pounding too loud, too fast. Lily, he said, stopping a few feet away. She turned, her eyes meeting his. For a moment, she didn't speak, just looked at him, her expression caught between surprise and something else, something raw, unguarded. Ethan, she said, her voice soft, almost lost in the hum of the room. You left, he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. With him. Her lips twitched, a faint, bitter smile. I didn't leave. He did. Said he had a better offer. Ethan's hands unclenched. Just a little. Good. Her eyes narrowed, searching his. Why do you care? He stepped closer, his voice low, urgent. You know why. She looked away, her fingers tightening on her arms. Don't do this, Ethan. Don't make this harder than it already is. Harder? He laughed, a dry, frustrated sound. You think this is easy for me? You think I want to be standing here, feeling like this, knowing I shouldn't? Her eyes snapped back to his, sharp, almost angry. Then walk away. Go home. Forget me. I tried, he said, his voice raw. I've been trying. But you're everywhere. In my head. In my house. In the way I can't sleep without seeing you. Her breath hitched, her eyes softening, just for a moment. You don't know me, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You don't know what I am. Then tell me, he said, stepping closer, close enough to feel the heat of her, to smell the faint floral of her shampoo. Tell me who you are. Let me know you. She shook her head, her eyes shining, like she was fighting something inside her. You don't want that. You want the girl who showed up at your door, The one who made you feel something, not the real me. Um, that's not true, he said, his voice low, fierce. I want all of you. The parts you hide, the parts you're scared of, all of it. She looked at him, her eyes wide, vulnerable, like she was seeing him for the first time. Why? She whispered. Why me? He didn't have an answer. Not a good one. Just the truth, raw and unpolished. Because you make me feel alive, he said. Because I've been half dead for years. And you woke me up. Her lips parted, but no words came. She just stared at him, her chest rising and falling, her hands trembling at her sides. For a moment, he thought she'd run. Thought she'd turn and disappear into the crowd, like she always did. But she didn't. She stepped closer, her eyes locked on his, and before he could think, her hand was on his chest, her fingers curling into his shirt. Ethan, she said, her voice breaking. This is going to break us. Ben, I know, he said, his hand covering hers, holding it there, feeling her heartbeat through her palm. But I'm already broken. She kissed him, not soft, not tentative, but desperate, like she was drowning and he was air. He kissed her back, his hands in her hair, pulling her closer, the world falling away. The balcony, the auction, the pio none of it mattered. Just her, just this. They broke apart, breathless, her forehead against his, her hands still on his chest. We can't do this here, she whispered, her voice shaky. He nodded, his heart racing, his hands still in her hair. Come with me. She hesitated, her eyes searching his, like she was weighing the cost. Then she nodded, just once, and took his hand. They didn't speak as they left the auction. Didn't need to. The silence between them was heavy, charged, like the air before a storm. He led her to his car, a sleek black thing parked in the garage, and opened the door for her. She slid in, her dress riding up just enough to make his throat dry. He got in, started the engine, and pulled onto the street, the city lights blurring past. Where are we going? She asked, her voice quiet, her hands folded in her lap. My place, he said, his eyes on the road. Mia's with her nanny tonight. She nodded, looking out the window, her reflection pale in the glass. Okay. The drive was short, too short, the city slipping by in a haze of neon and shadows. He parked in the underground garage, his hands tight on the wheel, his heart pounding. This was a mistake. He knew it, she knew it, but neither of them stopped. They took the elevator to his penthouse, the silence stretching, their hands brushing but not holding. The doors opened, and he led her inside, the lights dim, the city skyline glowing through the windows. She stopped in the living room, her arms crossed, her eyes on the floor. Ethan, she said, her voice soft, uncertain. What are we doing? He turned to her, his hands in his pockets, trying to keep them from reaching for her. I don't know, he admitted, but I don't want to stop. She looked up, her eyes meeting his, raw, unguarded. Neither do I. He crossed the room, slow, deliberate, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. He stopped in front of her, close enough to feel her breath, to see the pulse in her throat. Tell me to stop, he said, his voice low, rough. Tell me, and I will. She shook her head, her eyes shining. I can't. He kissed her, softer this time, slower, like he was memorizing her. Her hands slid up his chest, her fingers curling into his shirt, pulling him closer. He touched her like she was fragile, like she might disappear her waist, her hips, the small of her back. She was warm, real, and he was lost. They moved to the couch, her dress slipping off her shoulders, his shirt hitting the floor. It wasn't like the first night, rushed and desperate. This was deliberate, intentional, like they were both choosing it, knowing the cost. Her skin was soft under his hands, her breath hot against his neck. She whispered his name, and it broke something in him, some wall he'd built to keep the world out. Hours later, they lay tangled in a blanket, the city lights painting stripes across her skin. She was curled against him, her head on his chest, her fingers tracing lazy circles on his arm. He held her, his hand in her hair, his heart still racing. What happens now? She asked, her voice barely audible, like she was afraid of the answer. He didn't know. Didn't have a plan, a script, anything. Just the truth. We figure it out, he said, his voice low. Together. She nodded, her breath warm against his skin. Okay. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other, the city humming outside. For the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel alone. Morning came too fast. The sun filtered through the windows, soft and gray, the city waking up below. Ethan stirred, his arms still around her, her body warm against his. She was asleep, her face soft, her hair a mess across the pillow. He watched her, his chest tight, a mix of want and fear. He slipped out of bed, careful not to wake her, and pulled on a shirt. The penthouse was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt fragile, like it could break with a single sound. He made coffee, the machine's hum, the only noise, and stood at the counter, staring at the mug she'd used weeks ago, still in the sink. She woke a few minutes later, her steps soft on the hardwood. She stood in the doorway, wrapped in his blanket, her hair falling over her shoulders. Morning, she said, her voice shy, almost hesitant. Morning, he said, sliding a mug across the counter. Coffee? She nodded, taking it, her fingers brushing his. Thanks. They sat at the island, the silence comfortable but heavy, like they both knew the world was waiting outside. She sipped her coffee, her eyes on the mug, her shoulders hunched. What's wrong? He asked, his voice soft. She looked up, her eyes meeting his. I'm scared, she admitted. It feels real, and real things break. He reached for her hand, his thumb brushing her knuckles. I'm scared too, he said. But I'm not running. And she nodded, her eyes shining, like she wanted to believe him but wasn't sure she could. I have to go, she said, setting the mug down. I have work. He nodded, his chest tight. Let me drive you. I can take the bus, she said, standing, the blanket slipping off her shoulders. Lily, he said, his voice firm. Let me drive you. She looked at him, her lips twitching, like she wanted to argue but didn't have the energy. Okay. They dressed in silence. Her in her dress from the night before, him in jeans and a sweater. He grabbed his keys, and they took the elevator down, their hands brushing but not holding. The drive was quiet, the city waking up around them. She gave him an address, a diner downtown, and he pulled up outside, the neon sign flickering in the morning light. She turned to him, her eyes soft, almost sad. Thank you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. For last night. He nodded, his hands tight on the wheel. Call me, he said. If you need me, or if you just want to. She smiled, a real smile, small but warm. Okay. She got out, her dress catching the light, and walked inside. He watched her go, his chest aching, his hands still on the wheel. He didn't drive away until she was out of sight. The next few weeks were a blur. Ethan threw himself into work, into Mia, into the routine that kept him sane. But she was there, always, in the back of his mind. They texted, sometimes short, careful messages, like they were both afraid to say too much. How's Mia? She'd ask. Good. How's work? He'd reply. It wasn't enough, but it was something. A thread, thin but strong, keeping them connected. He saw her once, by chance, at a coffee shop. She was in line, counting out change from a worn wallet, her hair pulled back, her jeans frayed. He didn't approach her, just watched from his table, his heart pounding. She looked tired, but beautiful, her movements quick, like she was always on the run. She took her coffee and left, not seeing him, and he let her go, his hands tight around his mug. He started to notice things about himself. The way he smiled more, laughed easier. The way he left work early to read to Mia, her head on his shoulder, her giggles filling the room. The way he felt lighter, like a weight he'd carried for years, was starting to lift. But he also noticed the risks. His nanny asked why he was distracted, her eyes sharp, like she knew something. His colleagues raised eyebrows when he skipped drinks to go home. Whispers started small, but there. About him. About a woman. He didn't know how they knew, but they did. Small towns, even in a city, had a way of talking. He didn't care. Not really. But he worried about Mia, about what it would mean for her, If this, whatever it was, became something more. She was his world, his anchor, the one thing he couldn't fail. Then, one night, Lily called. It was late, past midnight, her name lighting up his phone like a flare. He answered, his heart in his throat. "Ethan," she said, her voice small, shaky. "Can I see you?" "Where are you?" he asked, already pulling on his shoes. "Outside," she said. "Your building." He rushed downstairs, his heart pounding, and found her on the steps, curled up in his jacket, her knees to her chest. She looked up, her eyes red, her face streaked with tears. "What happened?" he asked, dropping to his knees in front of her. She shook her head, her voice breaking. "I got fired," she said. "The diner. They said I was late too many times. I I didn't know where else to go." He pulled her into his arms, not caring who saw, not caring about anything but her. "It's okay," he said, his voice low, steady. "You're here now." She clung to him, her face buried in his chest, her tears soaking his shirt. "I'm so tired," she whispered, "of everything." He held her tighter, his hand in her hair, his heart breaking for her. "You don't have to do this alone," he said. "Not anymore." They sat like that, on the steps, the city quiet around them. He didn't know what came next, didn't have a plan, but he knew one thing. He wasn't letting her go. Not this time. The city was a murmur outside, its lights dim through the haze of early morning. Ethan held Lily on the steps of his building, her body trembling against his, her tears soaking his shirt. The jacket, the one that had started all this lay crumpled beside her, a silent witness to the chaos they'd made. Her words echoed in his head, small and broken. "I got fired. I didn't know where else to go." His arms tightened around her, like he could shield her from the world, from herself, from everything that had led her here. "We need to get you inside," he said, his voice low, steady, despite the storm in his chest. "It's cold." She nodded, her face still buried in his chest, her hands clutching his shirt. He helped her stand, her legs unsteady, and grabbed the jacket, draping it over her shoulders. She didn't resist, just leaned into him, her weight a quiet surrender. They moved through the lobby, the doorman averting his eyes, and took the elevator to his penthouse. The silence was heavy, not uncomfortable, but full, like they were both holding their breath, waiting for the world to catch up. Inside, the penthouse was dark, the city skyline a soft glow through the windows. Ethan flicked on a lamp, the light warm but stark, illuminating the lines of exhaustion on Lily's face. She stood in the living room, the jacket slipping off one shoulder, her arms crossed like she was trying to hold herself together. "Sit," he said, nodding at the couch. "I'll get you something. Water, tea, whatever you want." She shook her head, her eyes on the floor. "I don't need anything. I needed to be here." His chest ached, a mix of relief and fear. He wanted her here, wanted her close, but the weight of her words, her life, her pain felt bigger than he knew how to handle. He crossed to her, stopping just short, his hands itching to touch her. "Lily," he said, his voice soft. "What happened? Tell me." She looked up, her eyes red, raw, like she'd been crying long before she got to his door. "The diner," she said, her voice small. "They fired me. Said I was late too many times. Said I wasn't reliable." She laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "They're not wrong. I've been a mess. Since you." The words hit him like a punch. "Since me." She nodded, her eyes meeting his, unflinching. "I can't focus, can't sleep. I keep thinking about you, about that night, about everything. I'm late for shifts because I'm sitting on a bus, staring out the window, wondering what the hell I'm doing. Jess, me roommate, she's right. I'm a fool, chasing something I can't have." He stepped closer, his voice low, urgent. "You're not a fool, and you're not chasing something you can't have." Her eyes searched his, desperate, almost angry. "Then what is this, Ethan? What are we? Because I don't know. I don't know if I'm just a distraction for you, or if you actually—" She trailed off, her voice breaking, her hands clenching at her sides. He reached for her, his hands on her shoulders, gentle but firm. "You're not a distraction," he said, his voice raw. "You're— God, Lily, You're everything I didn't know I needed. And I'm scared as hell, because I don't know what this is either, but I know I don't want to lose it. I? Her breath hitched, her eyes shining with tears she didn't let fall. You don't know me, she whispered. You don't know what I've done, where I've been. I'm not, I'm not good for you. Then let me decide that, he said, his hands sliding to her face, cupping her cheeks, his thumbs brushing her tears away. Let me know you, all of you. The good, the bad, the parts you're scared of. I'm not running. She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch, her breath shaky. You should, she said, her voice barely audible. You should run. I'm not, he said, his voice fierce. Not from you. She opened her eyes, looking at him. Really looking, like she was seeing him for the first time. Then she kissed him, soft at first, tentative, like she was testing the water. He kissed her back, slow, deliberate, pouring everything he couldn't say into it. Her hands slid up his chest, her fingers curling into his shirt, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, hungry, desperate, like they were both drowning, and this was air. They stumbled to the couch, her hands under his shirt, his on her hips, pulling her against him. The jacket fell to the floor, forgotten, as they sank into each other, the world fading away. It wasn't like the other times, rushed or reckless. This was raw, real, like they were both laying themselves bare, knowing the cost and choosing it anyway. Hours later, they lay tangled in a blanket, the city lights painting stripes across her skin. She was curled against him, her head on his chest, her breath warm and steady. He held her, his hand in her hair, his heart still racing. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice small, almost lost in the quiet, for showing up like this, for making this messy. He tilted her chin up, his eyes meeting hers. Don't be, he said, his voice low. I'm glad you're here. She nodded, her eyes soft, almost shy. What happens now? He didn't have an answer, not a real one, just the truth, rough and unpolished. We take it one day at a time, he said. We figure it out, together. She smiled, a small, real smile, and nestled closer, her breath evening out as she drifted to sleep. He held her, watching the city outside, feeling the weight of her against him, the weight of what they'd started. For the first time, he didn't feel alone. But he knew the world was waiting, and it wouldn't be kind. Morning came with a soft gray light, the city waking up below. Ethan woke first, his arm still around her, her body warm against his. She was asleep, her face soft, her hair a mess across the pillow. He watched her, his chest tight, a mix of want and fear. This was real now, not a moment, not a mistake. And real things, as she'd said, could break. He slipped out of bed, careful not to wake her, and moved to the kitchen. The coffee maker hummed, the scent filling the air, grounding him. He leaned against the counter, staring at the mug she'd used weeks ago, still in the sink, a reminder of how far they'd come, and how far they still had to go. She stirred a few minutes later, her steps soft on the hardwood. She appeared in the doorway, wrapped in his blanket, her hair falling over her shoulders. Morning, she said, her voice shy, hesitant, like she wasn't sure where they stood in the daylight. Morning, he said, sliding a mug across the counter. Coffee? She nodded, taking it, her fingers brushing his. Thanks. They sat at the island, the silence comfortable but heavy, like they both knew the world was pressing in. She sipped her coffee, her eyes on the mug, her shoulders hunched. What's wrong? He asked, his voice soft, careful. She looked up, her eyes meeting his. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. Be here, with you. I'm not used to this. To what? She gestured vaguely, her hand trembling. This, someone caring, someone wanting me, not just for a night, but for real. His chest ached, a mix of sadness and something fiercer, something protective. I do, he said, his voice low, steady. I want you, all of you, and I'm not going anywhere. Her eyes searched his, like she was looking for the lie, the catch. You say that now, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But what happens when you know me? Really know me? I'm not clean, Ethan. I've done things, been places. I'm not the kind of person you bring home to your daughter. He reached for her hand, his thumb brushing her knuckles. You don't get to decide that, he said, his voice firm. I do. And I'm telling you, I want you here, mess and all. She looked away, her eyes shining, her breath shaky. You're too good, she said, her voice breaking. Too good for me. Wit. No, he said, his voice fierce. You're good enough. More than enough. And I'm not some saint, Lily. I'm just a guy who's been lost for a long time, and you found me. She looked at him, her eyes wide, vulnerable, like she was seeing him for the first time. Then she leaned across the counter, kissing him, soft and slow, like she was saying something she couldn't put into words. Kissed her back, his hand in her hair, his heart pounding. They broke apart, breathless, her forehead against his. I have to go, she said, her voice shaky. I need to figure things out. The job, my place, everything. He nodded, his chest tight. Let me help, he said. Whatever you need. Money, a place to stay. No, she said, her voice firm, almost sharp. I don't want your money. I need to do this myself. He wanted to argue, to tell her he could fix it, make it easier, but he saw the look in her eyes fierce, determined, like she was fighting for something bigger than a job. So he nodded, his hand still in hers. Okay, but I'm here, if you need me. She smiled, a small, real smile, and squeezed his hand. I know. She left a few minutes later, her hair pulled back, his jacket over her arm. He watched her go, the elevator doors closing, his heart heavy but full. He didn't know what came next, but he knew he wasn't letting her go. Not this time. The next few weeks were a strange dance. They texted more, their messages longer, less guarded. She told him about her day job interviews, a fight with Jess, a book she was reading. He told her about Meyer's new obsession with painting, her tantrum over broccoli, the way she asked for him at night. It was small, normal, but it felt big, like they were building something, piece by piece. They saw each other when they could. A coffee shop one afternoon, her hair damp from the rain, her smile shy but warm. A park another day, Mia running ahead, Lily watching her with a softness that made his chest ache. They didn't touch, didn't kiss, not in public, but their hands brushed, their eyes held, and it was enough. For now. But the world wasn't kind. Whispers grew louder, his nanny's pointed questions, his colleagues' raised eyebrows, a client's offhand comment about distractions. Ethan didn't care, not really, but he worried about Mia, about what it would mean for her, if people knew. If this became something more. Lily felt it too. He saw it in the way her shoulders tensed when they were out, the way her eyes scanned the crowd, like she was waiting for someone to judge her. She didn't talk about it, but he knew she was carrying more than she let on, more than she'd told him. One night, she called, her voice different, sharper. Can I come over? She asked, no preamble, no hesitation. Of course, he said, his heart racing. Where are you? Outside, she said, her voice tight. I'm sorry. I need you. He rushed downstairs, finding her on the steps, not crying this time, but angry, her hands clenched, her eyes blazing. What happened? He asked, his voice low, urgent. She shook her head, her breath coming fast. Jess, she said. She kicked me out, said I'm a mess, that I'm ruining everything. She found out I've been seeing you, said I'm throwing my life away for a rich guy who'll never love me. Ethan's jaw tightened, his hands itching to pull her close. She's wrong, he said, his voice fierce. She doesn't know me, doesn't know us. Lily looked at him, her eyes searching, desperate. Is she? Because I don't know, Ethan. I don't know what this is, what I am to you. I'm falling apart, and I don't know if you're catching me or letting me fall. He stepped closer, his hands on her shoulders, his eyes locked on hers. I'm catching you, he said, his voice raw. I'm here. I'm not letting you go. She closed her eyes, her breath shaky, her hands unclenching. I'm so tired, she whispered, of fighting, of being less. You're not less, he said, his voice fierce. You're everything. She opened her eyes, looking at him, really looking, like she was seeing him for the first time. Then she kissed him, hard, desperate, like she was trying to believe him. He kissed her back, his hands in her hair, pulling her closer, the world falling away. They went inside, her hands under his shirt, his on her hips, pulling her against him. It was messy, raw, like they were both fighting something bigger than themselves. They ended up on the couch, her breath hot against his neck, his hands on her skin, holding her like she might disappear. Hours later, they lay tangled in a blanket, the city lights soft through the windows. She was curled against him, her head on his chest, her fingers tracing his arm. "I don't have anywhere to go," she whispered, her voice small, almost ashamed. "You have me," he said, his voice low, steady. "Stay here, as long as you need." She looked up, her eyes wide, uncertain. I can't just move in. Mia, your life, it's too much." He tilted her chin up, his eyes meeting hers. "Mia's my world," he said. "But you're part of it now. We'll figure it out. Together." She nodded, her eyes shining, her breath shaky. "Okay," she said, her voice barely audible. "Okay." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other, the city humming outside. But Ethan knew the world was waiting, and it wouldn't be gentle. Not for them. Not for two people who'd crossed lines they couldn't uncross. The penthouse was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt alive, full of unspoken things. Ethan lay awake, Lily curled against him, her breath soft and steady on his chest. The city lights filtered through the windows, casting a faint glow across her skin, her hair a dark spill across the blanket. He held her, his hand resting on her back, feeling the rise and fall of her breathing. She'd fallen asleep hours ago, exhausted from tears, from anger, from the weight of a life that had never been kind. But he couldn't sleep. His mind raced, turning over her words, her pain, the impossible question of what came next. She'd said she had nowhere to go. No home, no job, no anchor. And he'd said, without hesitation, without thinking she could stay, here, with him. The words had felt right, necessary, like the only thing he could say. But now, in the dark, with the city humming outside, doubt crept in. Not about her, never about her, but about himself, about Mia, about the life he'd built, so carefully, so rigidly, and the chaos he was inviting in. He looked down at her, her face soft in sleep, her lashes dark against her cheeks. She was beautiful, not in a polished way, but in a raw, real way that made his chest ache. She was here, in his arms, and he wanted her to stay. But what did that mean? For her? For Mia? For the world that wouldn't let them be? He closed his eyes, trying to quiet his mind, but her words echoed. "I'm falling apart, and I don't know if you're catching me or letting me fall." He was catching her. He had to, because letting her fall, letting her go wasn't an option anymore. Morning came too soon, the light gray and soft, the city waking up below. Ethan stirred, his arm numb from her weight, but he didn't move, didn't want to break the moment. Lily woke slowly, her eyes fluttering open, her hand tightening on his chest. She looked up at him, her gaze sleepy but clear, like she was seeing him for the first time. "Morning," she said, her voice small, almost shy. "Morning," he said, his voice rough from the night. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his thumb lingering on her cheek. "You okay?" She nodded, but her eyes told a different story, uncertain, guarded, like she was bracing for something. "I think so," she said, sitting up, pulling the blanket around her. "Last night. I'm sorry. For falling apart like that." "Don't be," he said, sitting up beside her, his hand on her back. "You don't have to apologize. Not to me." She looked at him, her lips twitching into a faint smile. "You're too good, you know that? It's not fair." He laughed. A small, surprised sound. "I'm not good. I'm just trying. For you." Her smile faded, her eyes searching his. "What are we doing, Ethan? Really? Because I can't keep showing up here crying, making a mess of your life. You have Mia, you have everything, and you're enough," he said, cutting her off, his voice firm. "You're more than enough, and I want you here. Not just when you're crying, not just when you're lost. All the time." Her breath hitched, her eyes shining. "You don't know what you're saying," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm not. I'm not someone you build a life with. I'm a mess. I've always been a mess. Then we'll be a mess together, he said, his hand cupping her face, his eyes locked on hers. I'm not perfect, Lily. Far from it. But I know I don't want to lose you. Not now, not ever. She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch, her breath shaky. I'm scared, she admitted. Of this. Of us. Of what happens when the world finds out. So am I, he said, his voice low, honest. But I'm more scared of letting you go. She opened her eyes, looking at him, really looking, like she was searching for the lie, the catch. But there wasn't one. Just him, raw and open, offering her everything he had. She kissed him, soft and slow, like she was saying something she couldn't put into words. He kissed her back, his hand in her hair, his heart pounding. They stayed like that, tangled in each other. The world held at bay for a little while longer. But the day was coming, and with it, the reality they couldn't ignore. Ethan made breakfast pancakes, Mia's favorite, though she was still with the nanny for the weekend. Lily sat at the island, her hair pulled back, his jacket draped over her shoulders. She watched him, her eyes soft, a faint smile on her lips. You cook? She said, her voice teasing but warm. I try, he said, flipping a pancake, grinning when it landed perfectly. Mia's a tough critic. She says my pancakes are almost as good as her grandma's. Lily laughed, a real laugh, light and free. She sounds like a handful. She is, he said, sliding a plate in front of her. But she's the best thing in my life. He paused, his eyes meeting hers. One of the best things. Her smile softened, her cheeks flushing. You're sweet, she said, picking up a fork. Too sweet. They ate in comfortable silence, the clink of forks the only sound. It felt normal, domestic, like they'd done this 100 times. But it was new, fragile, and they both knew it. What's your plan? He asked, his voice careful, not wanting to push. For today. For everything. She set her fork down, her eyes on her plate. I don't know, she admitted. I need a job. A place to stay. Jess, she's done with me. I can't go back there. Stay here, he said, the words out before he could stop them. As long as you need. There's plenty of room. Mia's gone half the week with her nanny. It's just me. She looked up, her eyes wide, uncertain. Ethan, I can't. It's too much. Your life, your daughter. I don't belong here. You do, he said, his voice firm. You belong wherever I am. Her breath caught, her eyes shining. You don't know what you're saying, she said, her voice shaky. People will talk. Your friends, your work, Mia. I'm not someone you bring into that world. Let them talk, he said, his voice fierce. I don't care. And Mia, she'll love you. I know she will. She shook her head, her hands trembling. You're dreaming, Ethan. This isn't a fairy tale. I'm not some princess you save. I'm broken. And I'll break you too. He reached across the island, taking her hand, his thumb brushing her knuckles. You're not broken, he said, his voice low, steady. You're strong. Stronger than anyone I've ever met. And I'm not trying to save you. I just want to be with you. She looked at him, her eyes searching, desperate. Why? She whispered. Why me? Because you see me, he said, his voice raw. Not the money, not the name, not the life. Me. And I see you, all of you, and I'm not letting that go. She closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. He wiped it away, his thumb gentle, his heart aching for her. Stay, he said, his voice soft, pleading. Just try. For me. She opened her eyes, looking at him, really looking. Then she nodded, just once, her voice barely audible. Okay. The next few days were a blur of adjustment. Lily moved in, not with a grand gesture, but quietly, with a single duffel bag and a nervous smile. Ethan gave her the guest room, not because he didn't want her with him, but because he wanted her to feel safe, to have space. She hesitated at first, her eyes scanning the room too big, too clean, too different from the life she'd known. But she stayed, her bag on the floor, her jacket hung in the closet. Mia came home that Sunday, her ponytail bouncing, her chatter filling the penthouse. Ethan had told her about Lily, carefully, saying she was a friend who needed a place to stay. Mia, with her 5-year-old curiosity, had asked 100 questions. Is she nice? Does she like dinosaurs? Can she play with me? Ethan had laughed, his heart swelling, and promised she'd meet her soon. The first meeting was tentative. Lily stood in the living room, her hands clasped, her eyes nervous. Mia ran in, her backpack still on, and stopped, staring at Lily with wide, unblinking eyes. You're Lily? Mia asked, her voice bold, unafraid. Lily nodded, crouching to her level, a shy smile on her lips. Yeah, hi, Mia. Mia tilted her head, studying her. Do you like dinosaurs? Lily laughed, a small, surprised sound. I do. T-Rex is my favorite. Mia's eyes lit up. That's my favorite too. Want to see my T-Rex? Lily glanced at Ethan, her eyes soft, then nodded. Sure. Mia grabbed her hand, pulling her to the playroom, her chatter nonstop. Ethan watched, his chest tight, a mix of relief and something deeper, something like hope. They spent the afternoon together, Mia showing Lily her toys, Lily listening, laughing, her nervousness fading. Ethan joined them, sitting on the floor, his heart full as he watched them, his daughter, his world, and the woman who'd changed everything. But the world outside wasn't so kind. Whispers grew louder, sharper. The nanny asked pointed questions, her tone clipped. Who's the girl staying here? Is she safe around Mia? Colleagues made comments, veiled but cutting. Heard you've got a new friend, Ethan. Hope she's worth the trouble. A client pulled him aside, his smile cold. Be careful, man. People talk. Ethan brushed it off, his jaw tight, his focus on Lily, on Mia. But he saw the toll it took on her. She'd catch a glance from the doorman, a whisper from a neighbor, and her shoulders would tense, her eyes dropping to the floor. She didn't say it, but he knew. She felt like an intruder, a stain on his perfect life. One night, after Mia was asleep, they sat on the couch, a glass of wine between them. Lily was quiet, her knees pulled to her chest, her eyes on the city skyline. What's wrong? He asked, his voice soft, his hand on her arm. She looked at him, her eyes tired, guarded. I don't belong here, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Your world, it's too big, too clean. I'm dragging you down. He set his glass down, turning to face her, his hands on her shoulders. You're not, he said, his voice fierce. You're lifting me up. You and Mia, you're the only things that matter. Her eyes searched his, desperate. But people are talking, she said. About you. About me. They think I don't know, a gold digger. A mistake. And maybe they're right. They're not, he said, his voice low, steady. They don't know you. They don't know us. She shook her head, her hands trembling. I'm scared, Ethan. Scared of losing this. Scared of hurting you. Scared of hurting Mia. He pulled her close, his arms around her, his chin on her head. You're not going to hurt us, he said. You're part of us now, and I'm not letting you go. She clung to him, her face buried in his chest, her breath shaky. I love you, she whispered. The words so soft he almost missed them. His heart stopped, then started again, faster, fuller. He tilted her chin up, his eyes meeting hers. I love you too, he said, his voice raw, honest. More than I thought I could. She kissed him, slow and deep, like she was sealing the words, making them real. He kissed her back, his hands in her hair, his heart open, unguarded. They made love that night, not desperate or reckless, but tender, deliberate, like they were building something new, something lasting. Weeks turned into months. Lily found a job, not at a diner, but at a bookstore, her eyes lighting up when she talked about it. She moved out of the guest room, into her clothes in his closet, her books on his shelves. Mia called her Louie, her small arms around her neck, her laughter filling the penthouse. They were a family, not perfect, but real. And Ethan felt whole for the first time in years. But the world didn't stop. A tabloid ran a story, small but vicious. Millionaire's mystery girl. Who is she? It didn't name her, but the details were close enough her past, her struggles, the whispers of scandal. Ethan's lawyer shut it down, but the damage was done. Lily saw it, her face pale, her hands shaking. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice small, her eyes on the floor. "This is my fault." No, he said, his voice fierce, pulling her close. "This is their fault, not yours. Never yours." She nodded, but he saw the doubt, the fear. He hated it, hated the world for making her feel small. But he couldn't fix it, not yet. All he could do was hold her, love her, show her she was enough. One day, Mia came home from school, her backpack bouncing, her eyes bright. "Liwi," she called, running to her, a drawing in her hand. "I made this for you." Lily knelt, taking the paper, her eyes soft. It was a crayon sketch, 3 figures, a man, a woman, a girl, holding hands under a rainbow. "It's us," Mia said, pointing. "You, me, and Daddy." Lily's eyes filled with tears, her hand trembling as she held the drawing. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice breaking. "Thank you, Mia." Mia hugged her, her small arms tight, and Ethan watched, his heart full, his eyes stinging. This was it, he realized. This was what he'd been searching for, what he'd almost lost. That night, after Mia was asleep, Ethan took Lily's hand, leading her to the balcony. The city sparkled below, a sea of lights, endless and alive. He turned to her, his heart pounding, his hands steady. "Marry me," he said, the words simple, raw, no ring, no plan, just him. Her eyes widened, her breath catching. "Ethan, I mean it," he said, his voice low, fierce. "I love you. I want you with me, with us, always. Marry me." She looked at him, her eyes shining, her hands trembling. I'm not perfect," she said, her voice shaky. "I'm still a mess." "So am I," he said, his hands cupping her face, his eyes locked on hers. "But we're better together. Say yes, Lily. Say yes." She closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. Then she nodded, her voice barely audible. "Yes." He kissed her, deep and slow, the city fading away, the world nothing but them. They were broken, both of them, but together they were whole. The wedding was small, just Mia, a few friends, a quiet ceremony in a garden, the sun warm, the air sweet with flowers. Lily wore a simple dress, her hair loose, her smile brighter than he'd ever seen. Mia was the flower girl, her basket of petals spilling everywhere, her laughter echoing. Ethan stood at the altar, his heart full, his eyes on Lily, knowing this was right, this was home. They moved forward, together. Lily kept her job, her independence, her fire. Ethan scaled back work, spending evenings with Mia, with Lily, building a life that felt real. The whispers faded, the world moved on, and they were left with each other, with love, with a future they'd fought for. One night, months later, they sat on the couch, Mia asleep upstairs, the this jacket, their jacket folded on a chair. Lily leaned against him, her head on his shoulder, her hand in his. "We made it," she said, her voice soft, warm. He kissed her forehead, his heart steady, full. "We did." And they had. Through the mess, the fear, the world's judgment, they'd found each other. And that, he knew, was enough.